You work with people in terms of where they're at psychologically, so some people are much more available and ready to address things more explicitly, but often a lot of the work that we do, it's almost like pre-therapy. It's almost helping people to get to a point of stability or well-being that they can start to look at the effects of the trauma and the abuse, so that they can start to resolve that and move forward, or get themselves back into and get some semblance or quality of life again. But it really does vary from person to person, so it's hard to kind of to say more specifically. But I certainly think it's protective in some ways. If people are able to address those kind of issues, then hopefully that's going to bode well for their mental health and quality of life in the future. And equally, if people aren't able to do that work for whatever kind of reasons or don't, then I think it stands to reason that they're going to kind of continue to experience kind of difficulties throughout their lives. They may go through long periods of time where they cope well, where they are able to compartmentalise and kind of put the abuse or the memories to one kind of side, so people can be quite function quite well, have families, careers, whatever it is, but then something can be a trigger, or something can bring the trauma back into the foreground, and then their mental health might kind of deteriorate, or their relationships might break down, their jobs, or whatever it might be. So I think it's really important to address it. So it's a massive issue, and in a high proportion, I think it's unrecognised, and particularly with kind of a male client group, it's possibly even more taboo and not spoken of. So a lot of people that present in either mental health services, or people that are in the context, say, in a prison environment as well, offenders, that there'll be high instances of kind of abuse that are in the background. The substance misuse and those kind of things are often ways that people are self-medicating, the ways that they're trying to deal with the effects of post-traumatic stress and trauma, whether they're trying to kind of stop themselves experiencing flashbacks or whatever their symptoms are. That's a way that they're trying to cope with it. More broadly, I think kind of stigma still remains. People being able to find a voice and to speak out about it still remains hugely kind of, that's a massive deterrent. There's deeply ingrained kind of cultural kind of ideas, notions about what it is to be a man and how to kind of to cope. So, men might have more of a tendency towards kind of, using alcohol or acting out their distress. Other people will turn it against themselves. So it kind of, it shows itself in different ways. But I think there are cultural and there are kind of gendered differences as well, in terms of how people experience distress and how they seek support for it as well. I don't think men are as good at kind of networking or finding peer support in the same ways. I mean, there's support through other activities or ways that men kind of come together in groups, but I don't think it necessarily kind of addresses things at more of an emotional level. Of course, that's a huge generalisation, but I think that's some of the barriers that people face. I think it'll always be skewed in some ways. I mean, I think there's, I don't see those kind of gender inequalities. I don't think there's going to be equality in that way. That doesn't mean that I still think there can be a greater sense of kind of balance, that things will change, and difference isn't always bad. I don't think things have to be equal, though certainly in terms of law or in certain ways there needs to be more done to create greater equality between the sexes. I think information is probably the starting point. I think it's kind of raising awareness about the issues, and I think that's why agencies like this, are so important, and the work that kind of goes with it, because there's something about raising the awareness, making it more acceptable, and making it more normative in a way for people to recognise that this does kind of happen, and that there are services and kind of support available. And it's only if the issue gets talked about and understood in a healthy kind of grown-up way that it can be kind of reflected on, or that people can come up with more local kind of solutions, because I think that's what it's about. It's about, abuse kind of happens within families or in local kind of communities, so things need to be specific to those contexts in some kind of ways. But if victims, if people directly can feel that they can have a voice and that they can speak out, and access support, then I think that's, you know, probably the first thing, because those people are suffering and those people are in need of help. And then more broadly, there needs to be at a societal level, you know, things that are happening to protect people and to ensure that these abuses don't go on. But you've only got to look at all what's coming out in the media at the moment and everything, the amount of historical kind of abuse cases that are being reported, to see just how, you know, the extent of it, and just kind of how deeply embedded it is, and across different kind of, you know, obviously that's in kind of the celebrity world, or in kind of, you know, that's being reported on in those contexts, but it's, you know, it's happening across the board.